let's bring on our next speaker. I see him lurking backstage. There he is, Timothy Carroll, the CEO of Entheon Biomedical, ticker ENTBF here in the U.S. Timothy, how are we doing today?
Absolutely fantastic. Pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Pleasure to have you on. I see your slides. Let's roll, man. The floor is yours.
Okay, wonderful. And so I'm Timothy Carroll. I'm the CEO of Entheon Biomedical. We're developing a new dimension in addiction treatment. Just a bit of disclaimer language there. So yes, we're developing a personalized system of medicine within the emerging psychedelic therapy industry. Our intention here is to increase the safety and precision of psychedelic therapy using DMT and diagnostic tools. So at Entheon, we're powered by an unwavering commitment to significantly improve the odds of beating addiction and improving patient care. And to satisfy that, we have three distinct divisions. Entheon RX is focused on the development of drugs using DMT as the pharmacological benchmark. Entheon ID is focused on the identification, analysis, and predictive use of genetics and EEG biomarkers in selection and management of drug treatments, understanding that over the course of the next 5 or 10 years, a multitude of new drugs will come online. We're interested in pairing the appropriate patient to the appropriate drug. And Entheon IQ is focused on the development of treatment algorithms through the analysis of patient data to better optimize that form of care. So yes, we have a near-term human trial called EBRX 101. It's designed to be, in our estimation, the most rigorous and comprehensive study of DMT to date. We're looking to leverage DMT's unique pharmacokinetics for a flexible therapeutic program and to optimize the dosage and duration of the treatment to suit a variety of patient needs. And we're also developing a personalized medicine platform that uses EEG and genetics to predict mental health risks and characterize metabolic factors that may be related to various drug states. And our intention there is to aid in drug selection and personalization of therapy. And we intend for this to be applicable to not just DMT, but to a variety of psychedelic molecules and indications. We're a bit agnostic in terms of that. We understand that different people will be better suited to different forms of care. We're also investigating new chemical entities. We'll go into that in a bit later. And we're also researching proprietary DMT delivery systems, not just intravenous administration, but alternate forms of administration to better provide care to those that it may better suit. So yeah, the situation that brings us here today is actually really quite dire. We're in the grips of a public health crisis related to addiction, and there is a significant unmet need and a huge addressable market. Approximately 21.2 million Americans have some form of substance use disorder, and yet only 1 in 10 of those people receives any form of care. And we may see why in a minute. And as a society, it costs us anywhere in the range of about $750 billion per year, comprised of healthcare costs, policing, etc. And this year, we passed a very grim milestone in the US. Over 100,000 people died over a 1-year span. And globally, we see approximately 11.8 million people die prematurely as a result of addiction-related issues. And some of the shocking statistics here may boil down to the fact that there aren't really many effective means of treating addiction. We all know that residential treatment, rehab, whatever you call it, is first line of defense, and often stays there can cost anywhere from $5,000 to $30,000, and the efficacy is only about 5%. And the lived reality is that individuals may need to go to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 treatment centers before they even receive any form of relief. And as was the case with my brother, who I lost in March of 2019, he went to 7 different drug treatment centers and to no avail. So yeah, it's quite a shocking reality. 12-step recovery is amazing for those that it works for, but there are certain features of it that make it ineffective. There are religious connotations, and certain parts of the self-discovery process can be shame-based and shame-reinforcing. Medication-assisted therapies like Suboxone and Methadone are effective in getting the person off of the drug, but in reality, it simply replaces one dependency or another, and doesn't really address the root causes. And so we see a high rate of relapse when people stop medication-assisted therapy. And smoking cessation, of course, the options are abundant and cost-effective, but in spite of that accessibility and low cost, efficacy is limited to about 20%. There is a bit of historical evidence pointing to psychedelics being useful in the treatment of addiction. Meta-analysis of LSD used to treat alcoholism showed 58% improvement. Ayahuasca has been shown to reduce the severity of alcoholism. And very recently, one of our advisors, Matthew Johnson, conducted a psilocybin trial treating those that are suffering from smoking or from nicotine addiction. And very surprisingly, 87% of those people that took part in that reported abstinence at 6 months, and still very high, 67 and 60% at 12 and 16-month endpoints. So a lot of the difficulty of treating substance use disorder may boil down to the fact that it is highly complex. Substances are generally used to self-medicate a state that individuals find overly distressing. So that's the waking conditions of life, and that may be informed by trauma, certain behavioral patterns that just upon waking, an individual may find the world intolerable. So the removal of the substance alone does not guarantee any form of abstinence, but rather returns that person to that unmedicated, distressing state. So often we see abstinent and unsupported addicts suffer relapses quite frequently. So yes, the root of addiction is thought to be psychological and emotional in nature, independent of the specific substance of abuse. So the solutions that we create must be targeted at those base psychological and emotional causes. Where serotonergics or psychedelics are have so much potential is that they can actually elicit a change from a state of pathology to a pivotal state change. So addicts often suffer from a pathological state where there's very deeply entrenched thoughts and behaviors, and so strong habituation where the brain doesn't operate in a very critical way, and often people are just responding by default to certain stimulus. Psychedelic therapies can induce a state known as entropy, which is, in general terms, a state of randomness. But in the case of sort of neural connectivity, is a state of interconnectedness and state of heightened plasticity. And this state of heightened plasticity can move the brain to that state of criticality where new learning, novelty, reordering beliefs can happen. And so on the right, we see a brain, on the top right, we see a brain that's representative of the non psychedelic state, where you can see that the thought patterns are characterized by about, a couple of dozen different sort of default pathways. And on the bottom right, we see that upon the introduction of something like a psychedelic, or specifically a psychedelic, we see a massive explosion in terms of connectivity. And this explosion of connectivity is responsible, in our estimation, for that notion of having new perspectives, new beliefs, where even in response to old stimulus or triggers, a person can, rather than default to their own patterns or their old patterns of thinking, learn how to experience that anew. So the molecule that we've chosen to focus on for development is dimethyltryptamine. DMT elicits the desirable entropic effects of classic psychedelics, but has a very unique pharmacokinetics that make it very promising for clinical use. So just a bit of background about DMT. It belongs to the classic serotonergics along with mescaline, LSD, and psilocybin. All primarily act on the 5-HT2A receptor set. DMT has been used in the form of ayahuasca for hundreds, if not thousands of years by indigenous populations that use that within their holistic medicine systems. It's been pretty extensively scientifically studied. It's present within hundreds of different plant species. And very importantly, it's endogenous to the human body, meaning we're believed to create DMT, which means that we're very adept at metabolizing this. And our ability to metabolize this very rapidly and safely results in DMT being very short acting. And that short acting characteristic is something that we're leveraging in terms of our development. So the DMT molecule, in our estimation, possesses some very significant advantages over classic psychedelics. Ayahuasca, psilocybin, LSD are all capable of eliciting this highly entropic state and being transformational, but they are bound to some limiting factors. The reality is these forms of psychedelics generally have quite a long duration, anywhere from 6 to 8 hours plus, including the trailing effects. And given that the psychedelic treatment paradigm requires a physician or a therapist to oversee the entirety of that experience, it means that from a commercial perspective, it's very difficult to scale. It's a full day engagement, and during that time, as individuals are dealing with some of their base foundational triggers and stimulus, difficult experiences can occur. And with these longer form psychedelics, there's no means of ending a negative adverse event. And so, from the perspective of patient safety or from physician liability, that becomes a very tricky thing. There's also a lack of precise dose control due to the long duration and long half life of some of these drugs. When ingested orally, there's no means of modifying that dose downward. DMT, on the other hand, delivered intravenously, we can generate short session lengths anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. And this provides more accessibility and more scalability to physicians and patients. So this enables higher patient throughput. And it also provides us with the ability to end the session quickly if clinically necessary, as they're dealing with typically very difficult subject matter. When an overly distressing scenario occurs, we can simply stop the flow of DMT and that person will return to a functional baseline in about 10 or 15 minutes. And it also gives the ability to titrate or modify the dose if required based on what the physician perceives is appropriate for that individual. We can dial the dose up or down to arrive in that therapeutically useful range. This enables a more flexible therapeutic design where instead of building up to a long 6 to 8 hour long session and then unpacking that after, we can intersperse short psychedelic sessions with integration therapies. So building up, not tossing someone into the deep end, but saying, hey, test the waters, let's talk about it, and we'll build toward that point of effect. And this may result in potentially less time required in that psychedelic state in aggregate. So, just a bit of interesting science jargon. DMT is more potent than psilocybin, twofold more higher activation of the 5-HT2A receptor set than psilocybin. It's rapid pharmacokinetics, 5 minutes as opposed to 50 minutes for psilocybin. So this allows for near real-time clearance of drug effects when the flow of DMT is stopped. And there are also qualities such as increased dendritic spine density and synapse formation that essentially just mean that there are indicators that there may be long-term plasticity on top of the momentary instance of plasticity from the actual experience. And this may enable long-term and positive growth. So yes, the psychedelic experience is very weird. It's difficult to characterize, but those that do, have reports about it, generally experience vivid visual imagery and some somatic or bodily feelings, accompanied by a wide and powerful range of emotions outside of the scope of what is normally felt. And I think that's very important for people that are stuck in a depressive or addicted rut. And this broadened scope of experience can often lead to deep clarity and insight into one's life and relationships, and result in a dismantling of deeply held beliefs, which was super important for those that may have detrimental belief systems. And from a physiological or phenomenological perspective, there's some very interesting things that we're tracking and putting into our technology platform. There's something called alpha power drop that's responsible for the indication of visual activations. And very importantly, there's something called Limpel-Zipf intensity, which is a direct measure of entropy, as well as the reversal of cortical traveling waves that are indicative of predictive coding. So yes, these are all features that are observable via EEG, and we'll get into the platform in a second. So yeah, our progress in our estimation has been pretty stunning. This is a very rough overview of things that we're currently conducting, and we encourage everyone to visit the Entheon website to do a bit of a deeper dive. But yeah, Entheon RX, our drug development division, we have EBRX 101, which is a clinical trial of DMT. It's adaptive, single dose, double blind, placebo controlled, 5 cohorts of 10 subjects at ascending dose ranges per cohort. That's taking place with our amazing partners in the Netherlands. The primary aim is, of course, a safety trial, pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, but we're also very much interested in associating the EEG data associated with those various dose ranges to understand the subjective effects from an objective viewpoint of EEG. And we're also correlating that with genetic data to see if there are any metabolic factors that may indicate a differential response or a differential rate of metabolism. Of course, we're conducting a battery of non-clinical studies in support of predicted FDA engagements over the course of 2021 or 2022. And yes, Entheon RX is also developing new chemical entities. So we're developing DMT-based molecular entities evaluated on the basis of docking, binding, and ease of synthesis. We've conducted an exhaustive literature search, and we're currently in the process of evaluating certain synthesis partners. We anticipate to file some patents around our new chemical entities in the earlier part of 2022. And some of the properties that we're after in terms of our new molecules are neurogenerative or anti-ischemic effects, as well as non-hallucinatory forms of DMT, as well as forms of DMT that have enhanced pharmacokinetics. And we have some very good leads that we're looking to pursue. Additionally, we are looking, as mentioned, at alternate routes of administration to suit people that may not benefit from a intravenous form of administration, just based on life experience or maybe a history of intravenous drug use. So we identified our development partner and selected our dose ranges, and we expect to do a feasibility study around that over the course of 2022. Our biomarker platform, as we mentioned, is taking place. EBIQ 101 is an EEG analysis of the neurological activity of those that are undergoing ketamine treatment in patients with major depressive disorder. That's taking place with our amazing partners in Heading Health in Austin, Texas. That study is currently recruiting, and so we anticipate an imminent initiation of that project. And similarly, we're capturing EEG data associated with the what happens to a person following ketamine administration. We're also measuring neurophysiological changes from beginning to end over the course of that treatment, with the intention being to determine what treatment efficacy looks like so that physicians can validate if something useful or therapeutically useful has happened, and to track progress over time following treatment to see if there has been a maintenance or degradation of that treatment effect, so that they can then recommend at these various touch points following over the continuum of care more refined form of therapy. And of course, as mentioned, our DMT biomarker program is associating electrical activity with various dose ranges, understanding that there are specific therapeutic or subjective thresholds that physicians are very interested in knowing about. You don't want to push a person too fast, too far, but you also don't want to keep someone too shallow in terms of their immersion. So yes, we've witnessed a lot of interest in that project. Yes, and our biomarker program is also supported by our genetics division, our genetics arm. We recently acquired two companies in the genetic space, Halogen and Lobo. They have a direct-to-consumer genetic test kits looking at potential risk markers associated with psychedelic and cannabis use, and also with metabolism related to both of those drug categories. We're currently in the process of updating, expanding the gene markers to be inclusive of more molecules, and we expect for a new version of the Halogen test to be commercially launched before the end of 2021. So yes, we're developing a personalized system of psychedelic medicine. Our integrative approach to personalized medicine is seeking to change the current landscape of psychedelic psychiatry. We're leveraging the unique pharmacokinetics of DMT to create safe and adaptive drug experiences, pairing that with genetic biomarkers to predict drug selection and response, and pairing that also with EEG biomarkers to guide therapeutic programs, inform physicians of patient state during experience, and to track efficacy of those therapies over time. And this all results in a personalized psychedelic-based psychiatric care system that has utility at every stage of the psychedelic care journey, and gives physicians additional objective touch points that can better inform their care, but potentially even generate more revenue opportunities for them to have callbacks, have more opportunity to do reassessment, and to pepper in different forms of psychotherapy. So yes, our executive team is a lot of lovely faces. I know we're running short on time, but represent a broad background of traditional pharma discovery, pharma tech stacks, cannabis litigation, technology, and our scientific advisory board is the all-star cast representing, in our estimation, the best, brightest, and most entrenched in psychedelic research, as well as people that are very much in the field when it comes to patient care. And yes, I think we've seen this figure before: compound annual growth rate of the psychedelic drug market, 12.36%, expected to hit 10.75 billion by 2027. And we intend to have multiple instances or multiple opportunities for revenue generation to support that growing figure. And yes, some basic financials. We're trading on CSE under the ticker ENBI, on the Frankfurt Exchange 1XC1, and OTCQB as ENTBF. Thank you so much.
Wow. A lot to think about here, Tim. and I think the chat is also saying the same thing. This is very, very exciting. And frankly, presentations like the one that you just gave are why we are doing is basically why we started doing this conference, right? Because companies like yours, these small, these early stage companies are oftentimes the ones at the forefront, frankly, doing the coolest stuff, right?
It is very cool stuff. Yeah.
Trying to push or pull or drag us forward. It is a really, really fantastic thing that you're working on. And it seemed like you may have been answering questions from the chat as you went. We do have a few questions. A lot of them you did already address, but I would implore you to, after you're done here, to go check out the chat, because the comments are, we're all rooting for you. Basically, is the summary here.
There's a huge need. There's a huge need, and we sit at that very rare intersection of satisfying a massive public need. I think we're all aware of what society needs right now, and we just so happen to be in that very very opportune moment of actually having the science there to bring about solutions. And we're working as hard and as fast as we can to bring this to reality.
All right, here's one from Mitch, and he always asks this question. He wants to know where you derive your DMT from.
It is fully synthetically derived. We've had amazing manufacturing partners, absolutely to the highest degrees of GMP standards. We're putting this into humans, so it has to be over 99.7% pure. Fully synthetically derived.
All right, and here's a good question. We'll do one more, and then we do have to wrap here. But this is from Ben. At the end of the day, you are a business. You do need to make money, right? Who are you advertising in front of right now? How does this treatment get paid for, et cetera?
Absolutely. Yeah, our intention, of course, is to follow the very rigorous and pretty easy to understand, as difficult as it is to follow, just from a time and cost expenditure perspective, the regulatory pathways to have this be a fully FDA and EMA approved drug. The intention being to have this be totally sort of like insurance covered. With the intention of having this be an option for physicians to prescribe and to have copays occur. So, and we're seeing a massive proliferation of the actual last mile type of clinics that are taking shape over the course of North America, and more physicians are actually emailing us, calling us every day and saying, hey, when is this actually going to be something that I can prescribe? So the intention isn't to replace the medical system. The intention is to slot into the already established prescribing models and insurance copay systems that already exist.
And then the last one, I promise. How do you give doses? Intravenous?
Yeah, currently intravenously, but as we know, or as I mentioned, we're very deeply interested in alternate forms of administration. I can't say what. That's one of those little secrets for now, but that release will likely be coming over the course of Q1. But yes, intravenous, it's super direct, it's super understandable, but we're looking at different forms of administration to make it a bit more palatable, or a little bit less, ominous. No one really likes a needle in their arm, but they'll take it if it's life-saving.
Exactly. All right, Timothy Coe is the CEO of Entheon Biomedical. Timothy, as I said, very thought-provoking presentation. Thank you so much, and good luck. We're all rooting for you.
Appreciate it. Thank you all.
All right.